What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the ynggpodcast. Today, we're going to be talking about our Central Division predictions and our offseason in-depth analysis of basically the draft, the trades, the signings that were made during the offseason, and how that's going to affect the team heading into the 2023-2024 season. So, starting off, we have the Arizona Coyotes, a team that looks a lot younger than previous years, and there's a lot more potential and a lot more excitement in general, in my opinion, when you have so many former first round picks in the lineup. I think that's going to be very exciting for them. And I'm not saying this is a playoff team, they're far from it, but there's a lot of guys to look forward to. And also, they've added guys to help them out in terms of experience. And those veterans are guys like Alexander Kerfoot, for example, and Travis Boyd. So, what are your and they bring back Nick Bukestad as well. So, what are your thoughts about the Arizona Coyotes heading into the season? And also, what do you think they could do in terms of damage throughout the season? Are they a playoff team or they're far from it?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're far from it. I think that they're a team that it could surprise a lot of people this season. And I know that the Central is a very interesting division because there are some very good teams in there. And Arizona, is kind of looked at as an outlier. But for me, what I'm really interested with Arizona is the fact that they're a young team. Dylan Gunther is going to be in his second pro season. Logan Cooley's coming in, like you said. They've added some guys. They've bolstered their decor a little bit. They brought in Matt Dumba, who I think is going to be a good asset for them. They acquired Sean Dursey during the offseason as well. That might play a role for them. So they definitely have a young and exciting team. I think Andre Tournier as a coach is a fantastic coach. He's probably one of the best coaches in the NHL, in my opinion, at just getting the best out of his players. I like this team a lot. The problem with Arizona, I think, is the fact that they're in a division that's very good. And, when you come up against teams like Colorado, like Nashville, like St. Louis, um, like Vegas, who are the defending cup champions, you're going to have a tough time. But in my opinion, if Arizona can, get their goaltending like they did from Vamelka last year, and if they can score some goals and put the puck in the net, they might be better than I think a lot of people might give them credit for. For me, in my opinion, I think this is a team that's probably going to finish seventh in the Central. I think they're probably closer to St. Louis than a lot of people think. I think them and St. Louis might be interchangeable, but to me, I think they're going to finish seventh again. It's not going to be their year this year, but they're going to get some promising scoring from the likes of Logan Cooley. Clayton Keller is going to have another really good year, and their players are going to develop into really good players. And hopefully, within the next a year or two, we're going to be seeing a different Arizona Coyotes team, and hopefully a team that's going to be able to finally compete for a playoff spot. But I like what they're doing, and I think they're better than a lot of people give them credit for.
Yeah, and they've entered a point now where, heading into the trade deadline, they don't really have much to offer in terms of trade assets. Jason Zucker, Alex Kerfoot, I think they're going to stay with the team for a couple of years. I don't think they're going to be moved anytime soon. These rookies need vets in this team, and guys like Logan Cooley would love to learn from those types of players. Jason Zucker did not work out in Pittsburgh, except having that bounce back season last year. But ultimately, he signs with Arizona. Matias Maccelli is a very underrated player on this team, and honestly should have got a lot more votes last year for the Calder for Rookie of the Year award. Clayton Keller, always exceptional. I think he's going to take another step forward. And in terms of their defense, I think that's their weakest point, even though they did add guys like Matthew Dumba and Sean Dursey. I do believe that that's their weak point, and that's what's going to cost them. And their goaltending, I would say it's average at best. Not the worst duo in the league, but definitely not the greatest. But I do agree with you. I think this team will miss the playoffs, but they will be close to St. Louis, and we'll move on to the next team. So the Chicago Blackhawks. So the Chicago Blackhawks, everyone is talking about them right now, and the big reason why is Connor Bedard. Second reason, probably Taylor Hall, but Connor Bedard, exceptional player, franchise player, generational player, whatever you want to call him. That's what he is. He's a highlight reel player. He's going to be a guy that's going to carry the Chicago Blackhawks for years to come, but they have to build around him. And as of right now, even though they added veterans like Felino and Perry who had grit and had letters on their jerseys in the past. It's still not they're still not good enough. Taylor Hall, he's towards the end of his career as well. He's not the same Taylor Hall he once was when he won the MVP with the New Jersey Devils a couple years ago. But Taylor Hall does love playing with exceptional players. He's done so with New Jersey. He's done so in Edmonton, and he's done so with the Boston Bruins and now the Chicago Blackhawks. So it's always good to have a guy that knows to play with exceptional players on the same line with Connor Bedard. So I think that's going to help him. And this is a new era now without Jonathan Taves or Patrick Kane moving forward. So we'll see what happens. But this is a team that I do believe will finish last in their division. They'll have a couple of games here and there that will be interesting to watch, especially when you see Connor Bedard and Taylor Hall connect. But overall, just a very weak team, a team that's rebuilding, a team that still has a lot of years and a lot of pieces in order to be considered a contender.
Yeah, I mean, look, young team that is building. They're building something for sure. I like their two centers. I like Bedard. Obviously, we all know, like you said, how good Connor Bedard is. He's gonna probably, win the Calder this year. Even though he doesn't have the best players with him, I still think he's gonna probably win the Calder. And I'm a big fan of Lucas Reichel, and I think that that's what you gotta kind of build if you're Chicago. You have to put this in a position where those are your two guys you have to build around. Obviously, they have Frank Nazar as well, who's not going to be playing with them this year. And then on the back end, they have a few guys, Kevin Korchinski, who they're pretty high on. They're expecting him to make the team. And obviously, they still have Seth Jones and Wyatt Kaiser, who I think is someone that they're excited about. For me, I think this is going to be another transition year for Chicago. I don't. Last year, they didn't finish dead last in the NHL. They were last in their division, but they ended up actually finishing third last in the NHL. They ended up winning the draft lottery. I think they're probably going to be closer to the bottom five this year again. But I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. I like what Luke Richardson did last year. Unfortunately for Chicago, they don't really have the best goaltending system. Peter Mrazek last year struggled, had an 896 save percentage. Arvid Soderblom showed some promise, and I think their expectation is that they're expecting him to, come in and be the good backup. But besides that, I think Chicago is going to be probably a team that is going to be, they're going to finish bottom. They're going to be in the bottom five, but, they're going to get some good production. I think Taylor Hall is going to probably, if he can have a career year, I think that's going to be good for him. Philip Kurashev's a guy that could maybe take the next step. And Athanasiou is going to be looking to potentially, up his point totals again. I know that he re-signed with Chicago this year. So those are guys that I think are going to be interesting to watch. And obviously Lucas Reichel and Bedard are the two main pieces there that you're going to build around. So exciting future for Chicago, but I think it's going to be another down year for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you could also throw in names like Kurashev as well and Taylor Radish that are,
Yeah.
they're on the younger side as well that could, step up and be key players for the Chicago Blackhawks throughout the season. But at the end of the day, this is a team that's younger than older. The only old guys on this team are really Dickinson, Felino, Perry, Tyler Johnson, Seth Jones, Nikita Zaitsev, and you could also throw in Connor Murphy in the mix if you want. Jared Tenorti, whatever. I think he's closer to the younger side, but this is not a competitive team whatsoever. Rebuilding,
No.
not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But I think everyone will get an opportunity to play with Connor Bedard, whether it's on the power play or if it's on the first line. I don't see Tyler Johnson being the right wing for him throughout the whole season. I do believe that they'll try guys like Corey Perry that has played in the top six in the past before, and also maybe a guy like Ryan Donato who's played left and right wing before. There's a lot of interchangeable pieces in terms of the wings, so I do believe that Tyler Johnson is a guy that will not that will be moved out at some point in terms of the lines. But I do believe that Taylor Hall and Bedard are going to be the main duo here in this team moving forward. But
Yeah.
moving on to the next team, we have the Colorado Avalanche. So the Colorado Avalanche, pretty busy offseason in my opinion. Um, Ross Colton is traded to Tampa Bay. From traded from Tampa Bay to Colorado, signs a 4-year extension. They take a chance on Jonathan Drouin, who has history with Nathan McKinnon, where they played with the Halifax Moosehead back in the juniors before they got drafted. They were fantastic together, so they're hoping for that magic to happen once again. Drouin had a very bad, uh, you know, era with the Montreal Canadiens, and he needed to change the scenery, and that's exactly what he gets. And I think honestly, this could be his last chance. You have Ryan Johansson or Johansson, whatever you want to call him. He signs. He has 2 years left. He got traded from Nashville. He was a cap dump. I still think that he has a lot to provide to a team like Colorado. With Nazem Kadri being gone and then being replaced with Evan Rodriguez. Now he's gone. I do believe that he now is the next guy in line to take over that role. And then they bring in Miles Wood. People are not too crazy about the term, even though he's a decent player. His his contract, in terms of salary is fine, but the length is crazy. And then they add Frederick Olofsson from Dallas Stars, and then the key departures. A lot of guys are gone. You have Lars Eller that they added the trade deadline, JT Compher, who signs a ludicrous deal with the Red Wings. Don't blame him for signing that. They trade Newhook, and the list goes on. Then re-signed Colliano, Ben Myers, Bowen Byram, and Jack Johnson, and rookies who could crack the lineup. Nothing too crazy or special, but I do believe that Colorado will be a contending team moving forward. And, you know, I do believe on paper they are somewhat better. Um, they also added Thomas Tatar, which for some reason they didn't update this list, so that's another guy to add to the list. So I do believe on paper they do have potential to be better than last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, for Colorado, we all know how good they are. The only concern I think for Colorado is the fact that Landeskog is going to miss time and he's going to be out on LTIR and he might not play this year. That's a concern, I think, if you're Colorado. But this is a team that we know how good they are, right? And if you look at the top nine, I mean, just there's that top nine is really really good. Probably one of the best top nines in the league. And look, I know a lot of people are not big fans of Jonathan Drouin. I think there's an opportunity for him to have a really good career year for him and a bounce back. And like you said before, change of scenery might help him. Ryan Johansson, decent second line center, struggled in Nashville towards the end of his career, but he still got some serviceable hockey left in him. I think he could be a really good service for them. Ross Colton, I like, big fan of him. And I think that third line, they rejuvenated it, adding Miles Wood and, like you said, Thomas Tatar. They've added some good players. And I think that this is a team that, we all know what they're capable of. And obviously they have the probably one of the best decors in the league with Kale McCarr, Sam Gerard, Josh Manson, Devin Tays, Bowen Byram. Like those are really good players, all of them. And then obviously your sixth defenseman is Jack Johnson, and you have Curtis McDermott as well. Listen, that decor is fantastic, and if they can stay healthy, they're great. I think the concern again for Colorado is, Georgiev had a good year last year. Is are they going to be able to get a serviceable backup to play in behind Georgiev? We know Francouz is out to start the year. He may miss potentially 2 to 3 months due to injuries. So they're going to be looking for potentially a backup goalie. Is Justus Adanen going to be the backup goaltender, or are they going to seek something else? That's remain. We're gonna. It still remain to be seen what's going to happen there. But to me, I think, in my opinion, they're definitely one of the best teams in this division. I don't have them finishing first, unfortunately. I actually have them finishing second. I believe that they're good enough that they're going to be probably within the 100-point plateau. But again, I think they're just going to fall behind and just fall short of the division title. But still one of the best teams in the league. I think they're going to be fun to watch, exciting, and they might do some damage in the playoffs. But they're definitely. I have nothing but negative to say about this team.
But I would also like to add that Landeskog is expected to come back at some
Okay.
point, whether it's the end of the season or some point during the playoffs. He will come back. He's not, he'll miss like 90% of the season, but he'll be back before the end of the season and start of playoffs, if anything.
Okay.
So that would be their biggest add this year. And what I love about this Colorado team is that their wingers could play up and down the lineup. Everyone's interchangeable. Anyone could move up. Like Tom Tatar's played top 6 minutes with the Canadians and New Jersey Devils and Detroit Red Wings, so he's able to do that. If Drouin doesn't work out, he can move up on that top line, or maybe Lehkonen. Um, in terms of Nuchushkin, we know the situation, but they've moved on with that. So he's expected to be back. He is back in training camp, and everything looks fine. So we're just closing that chapter and that whole incident during the playoffs. But their defense, they arguably have the best duo in the league with Devon Taves and Kale McCarr. So as long as those guys are out on their game and they're healthy, this team's going to go very far, and this team will, in my opinion, finish in the top two. I don't know if they're a clinch in my mind for first in the Central, but definitely in the top two. But moving on to the next team, the Dallas Stars, a team that honestly, very underrated, and they got probably one of the best players during the offseason for dirt cheap, and Matt Duchene, who got bought out by the Nashville Predators. And he wasn't on the best contract. He didn't have his best years with the Nashville Predators, but he had a pretty good season 2 years ago with them, so he's still capable of producing. He signs a 1 year deal at $3 million. They add a guy like Craig Smith, serviceable third line, fourth line player. Stamp Steele, they've had him. In terms of key departures, they lose Max Domi that they added at the deadline, and Colin Miller, and the list goes on. But nothing too significant. Their main guys are intact, and that's good. And they've re-signed Evgeny Dandanov, who had a really good tenure with the Dallas Stars after getting traded from the Montreal Canadiens to the Dallas Stars for Garyanov, so that's great as well. But one guy that two guys actually that could make the team are Maverick Bork and Logan Stankoven, who we've been hoping for the last couple of years to crack this team. So I do believe that the Dallas Stars will be competitive once again. I think it's really between them and Colorado to finish first in the Central. But I think as of right now, I have Colorado probably surpassing them. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Dallas is a team that's intact. Okay, they've added some key players here and there. Colorado, on the other hand, a lot of their guys are new, and a lot of the guys that they had last season are gone in terms of forwards. So they reshaped their whole forward core. Will they develop chemistry by the start of the season that will make them a top team that will surpass the Dallas Stars? That's a question that we'll find out at the start of the season. But as of right now, the Dallas Stars are pretty much the same team like last year. And Danilov was added at the deadline, and he played with them heading into the playoffs, and they went on a pretty good playoff run, and he had great chemistry with them. So, in my opinion, the fact that you have Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene playing on the third line, this team is very, very scary. So, um, yeah, I don't know what you think about the Dallas Stars, but I mean, they also have great goaltending and Jake Ottinger as well in their defense. Miro Heiskanen, one of the most underrated and best defensemen in this league.
Listen, I'm on the Dallas hype train. I believe everything they're gonna do. I think they're one of the most. I think they're one of the best teams in the league. I'm a big fan of Jake Ottinger. I think he's gonna have a fantastic season this year, and I'm gonna make a bold prediction right now. I think he wins the Vezina. Yep, you heard it here first. I think he's gonna win the Vezina, but we'll see. I like everything that Dallas has done. I'm a big fan of Logan Stankoven and Maverick Bork as well. I think both of them could make the team. Like you said before, the Duchesne signing, very good signing. An underrated player who I think last year had a really, had a good year with Nashville. And I think a lot of people were surprised that he got bought out. I think he's going to play a big role for Dallas. Evgeny Dodonov, who seemed to fit really well when he joined them last year, signed an extension with them. So good for him. But this is a team that's got it all, man. That top line is everything that you want in a top line. They've been one of the most dominant lines in the NHL um, the last couple of years. And then obviously your second line, Jamie Benn had a better year last year. You're expecting potentially Wyatt Johnston to continue. I don't know if Genny Dodanov's going to be on the second line, but that top nine's really good. And if you can add Logan Stankoven and also Maverick Bork to that, that just makes your team a lot better. I think Dallas is just a better all-around team than Colorado. I think the uncertainty in net for Colorado is going to cost them, whereas for Dallas, whether it's Jake Ottinger or Scott Wedgwood. Wedgwood proved last year he was capable of doing it as the backup. And I know that Dallas, maybe their decor isn't the best on paper, but Heiskanen, like you said, is really good. Esa Lindell, one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. And I know that Ryan Suter is not getting any younger, but he's still a decent defenseman. I think there's a lot of potential there. Nils Lundqvist and obviously Thomas Harley as well, two young defensemen that are looking to break out and potentially be top four defensemen. And then you have Yanni Hakanpää, who tough defenseman, big body, can throw some hits. So Dallas really has it all on their decor, and I think they're one of the most all-round teams. In my opinion, they're the best team in this division. Just flat out, I think they're going to compete with Colorado. Like you said, it's going to be between them and Colorado for the top two spots. But ultimately, I think Dallas takes it, and they're going to finish top in the Central.
And what's great about the Dallas Stars is that Wyatt Johnson had such a great rookie campaign, and I think he's going to build on that. I know there's like this whole like
Yeah,
thing about like sophomore slumps. I don't believe that's the case. The team is way too good to let that happen. Joe Pavelski, even though he's in the twilight years of his career, does not show any rust whatsoever. This guy is still killing it. Such a great player. He's great in the playoffs. He's great in the regular season. You could always count on him.
yeah,
Um, Robertson, Robo, such a fantastic player. He's really working up himself in the top 10 in terms of best players in the league. Roop Hintz, one of the most underrated players in this league. The fact that your top three centermen are Hintz, Johnson, and Seguin is ludicrous. That is crazy. I wish that my team had that much depth at the center position, and their
maybe
winger
one day. Maybe one day.
and their winger depth is great as well. This is just a team that they will win the division if Colorado's offensive chemistry does not kick in. But the way I see it right now, Dallas wins in terms of offense. Colorado wins in terms of defense, and in terms of goaltending, Dallas takes it. But again, Colorado's offense, if they have that chemistry, they'll be able to keep up with Dallas's offense. But
Yeah,
only time will tell. Moving on to the next team, we have the Minnesota Wild, who just re-signed Marcus Foligno to a 4-year deal, and also re-signed Matt Zuccarello to a 2-year deal. So those two guys seem to be finishing their career with the Minnesota Wild, which is a good thing. The key arrival here is Pat Maroon, but a lot of key departures: Nyquist, Ryan Reeves, Steele, Sundqvist, Dumba, and Klinberg. Most of these guys were added at the trade deadline. And in terms of guys that they're re-signed, I mentioned two of them already. The other guys are listed here. And um, also, Keelan Addison signed a 1-year deal. This is not updated. And in terms of guys who could crack the team, I would probably say Marco Rossi is the most likely to crack the team. They need that top line center, and I think he can be that guy. I know they tried Ryan Hartman many times, and it's worked for the most part, but I think ultimately Marco Rossi fits in that role a lot better. And you can never have too much of depth. So the Minnesota Wild, I see them finishing third in the Central Division. I mean, they could surprise us and probably finish second if things don't go right with Colorado. But yeah, I think Dallas and Colorado are going to fight for that first spot, and then third, it's easily going to go to the Minnesota Wild.
uh, can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I disagree.
Oh, really?
So here's why I disagree. I don't think they did much. In fact, they didn't do anything this offseason apart from bringing in Pat Maroon. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they bought out Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, so they didn't have the cap space to do anything. But this is a team that I think is just not in a position yet to be. I don't look at them as a cup contender, and I don't think they're better than Dallas or Colorado. The problem with me is that I think this is a team that I think might be overhyped. And the reason I say that is this, okay? And I'm not trying to disregard Minnesota, but Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Zuccarello, we know how good they are. Ryan Hartman's been really well, really played well for them. Hasn't been always at his best, but he's played well. Joel Eriksson X had his struggles, but the expectation is he might get there. And obviously, Matt Boldy's a really good player. After that, it kind of falls off, right? That top six is okay. You want to add Marco Rossi to that top six, maybe that'll make it better. But the bottom six and their depth has always been something that's been a concern for me. And I know that, in the regular season, depth isn't always that important. Yes, you need it. But at the end of the day, if your star players are your star players, you might make it. I think for Minnesota, there's a lot here that is to be desired, or a lot here that I think is going to be problematic. I don't like their bottom six. I think it's probably one of the weakest in the league. Freddie Gaudreau last year played well. I think it was an overachieving season. Marcus Foligno, I think it's too much of a contract on a long term deal that I'm not too uh, excited about. I don't think he um, necessarily deserves to play for that long. So there's a lot of question marks with Minnesota. And then the other thing too is on the back end. Now, on the back end, my issue with Minnesota is just the fact that, like, if you look at it, there's just nothing that's wow, right? Jacob Middleton's a decent defenseman. We all know how good Jared Spurgeon is. Brodeen's been okay. Addison last year had ups and downs. The expectation is he'll bounce back. Goligoski's not getting any younger, and I think that he's at a point now where he might struggle. And then you have Brock Faber, who's a young defenseman. There's a lot of potential with him, but again, it's his first year. The expectation is unknown. And then in net, again, there's a lot of question marks. Marc-Andre Fleury, who last year towards the end of the year struggled, he did, and he wasn't at his best. And the expectation is that after this year he might retire. How's he going to be? Is he going to be back to the same Marc-Andre Fleury we know, or is he going to struggle? And Philip Gustafson, who, as much as he had a really good year last year, he did play really, really well. The expectation is I don't know if he's going to play like that again. So with Minnesota, there's a lot of question marks, and I don't necessarily think they're going to be as good as people give them credit for. I still like Kirill Kaprizov. I think he's still going to be their MVP. But for me, I have this team fourth. And the only reason I have this team fourth is because I think there's another team that might be better than them that I don't think people are talking about. But I think for me, Minnesota might just squeak in a wild card spot. I think they're going to finish fourth and maybe just squeak into the playoffs.
Well, now that I think about it and you explain it a lot more, um, I wouldn't say they're a lock. I think that they have the experience. I think they have the chemistry because this team has been together for a while now. They also have guys that are coming up, like Wallstead, that is gonna
Yeah,
end up pushing for a position once Fleury retires, and it's gonna be him and Gustafson as the goaltending duo. And that's another amazing goaltending duo, in my opinion. But yeah, I think this team, Matthew Boldy, he's such a fantastic player, and Kaprizov, and the top six is fantastic in my opinion. Like Marcus Johansson, who they added at the trade deadline, I did not expect him to have such an impact because
yeah,
the first time with Minnesota, he was average at best. But when he got slotted in the Minnesota Wild's roster, he kicked ass. It's like everything was clicking. And
yeah,
that's another question mark. Will he be able to do that again this season? And they re signed him because of that, hoping that he could do that. And yes, I know there's guys they're aging, but they're a good mesh, or I'd say an equal mesh of young guys and older guys on this team. But they have a good prospect pool, and a couple guys are going to be pushing for spots here, whether if it's throughout the season or if it's for next season. I don't believe that all these older players at the bottom six are going to be playing every single night. I do think that some of these guys will be scratched come October. But again, we'll see what happens. But I do believe that Minnesota knows that they need to add a couple of pieces here and there. And I think defense is their weakest spot. I think forwards is good. Um, Not amazing, but just good. And their goaltending duo is solid as well. Um, so we'll see what happens. But there is one team, and I have a feeling of who you're mentioning right now. And I think that's our next team. No, it's not. But it's the next team we'll be talking about are the Nashville Predators. Um, a lot of movement. They have Barry Trotz as their GM now. So that's a new thing for them. So Dennis Garyanov, they take a chance on him. He has potential, but didn't work out in Montreal. He was playing well, then he wasn't. This and that with Dallas. He didn't live up to the hype, unfortunately, even though he had one solid year. They have add Gustav Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen, and key departures. Pretty long list. But the two significant pieces here are Johansson and Duchesne. And in terms of resigning Cody Glass, earned that contract. A good, feel good story where a lot of things were against him. There was a lot of hype around him a couple years ago. Didn't live up to the hype, but obviously, um, he earned his contract and just spot with the Nashville Predators, even though it didn't work out with Vegas. And rookies who will crack up the lineup. Luke Evangelista, he had a pretty good showcase last year whenever he was in the lineup. So I do believe he'll be a lock in terms of Nashville Predators. But I think I know what Luke is going to say. What the heck are the Nashville Predators doing? What's their plan moving forward? Because they added a bunch of geezers. Okay, Luke Shen is not young by any means. Ryan O'Reilly to Gustav Nyquist as well. These guys are old guys, and they're signed for not 1 year. They're signed to 2 to 4 years. So what's the plan here? They're trying to stay competitive. I don't think they have the team to be competitive. I don't think they're near being a competitor. I think they missed the playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, to me, this team is going to be reliant on two guys basically, Philip Forsberg and UC Saros. And obviously, we know how good Saros was last year. He was in the Vesna conversation. They brought in Ryan O'Reilly. I like Nashville. I do. I like them as a team, but in terms of what they have on their roster, this isn't a team that's good enough. And I know that I talked about it before that I thought Arizona was going to compete with St. Louis. I was wrong. They're going to compete with Arizona, with Nashville as potentially for that 7 or 6 spot in the Central. I have Nashville finishing sixth. Um, I I like their team. Like I said, I actually like watching Nashville. I like Saros. I'm a big fan of Philip Forsberg, but they have some young guys that I think are going to be there, like Luke Evangelista, like you said, Philip Tomasino, Cody Glass, but everything else is just very meh. And that's really the only way I could say it. Guryanov's not the best. Gustav Nyquist, I know he had a decent year with Minnesota when he was there, but again, he's at a point in his career where he's aging. Then your fourth line, Yuso Parsonen, kind of came out of nowhere. The expectation is he might be able to bounce back, might be able to have a good year again, but a lot of uncertainty there. And then on defense, I mean, look, it's not a bad decor by any means. Yossi's not bad. Tyson Berry and McDonough are pretty good. Luke Shen's a decent defenseman. And then you got Carey and Fabro. Their decor is not bad. And obviously in net, they do have UC Saros. So they're not going to be as bad in terms of the defensive side of the game. But this is a team that's going to be reliant on that, right? They're very reliant on their decor and their goaltending. And I think if even if they go on a situation where Saros is not at his best, it's going to cause them problems. They can't score. Or they don't have enough players. I think they don't have the best players to score. So they're going to be a very defensive team this year. And I think ultimately, just based on everybody else that's in their division, I think that's the problem that's going to happen with Nashville is they're going to fall into a situation where their goaltending might keep them in it, so they might win games 2-1, 3-2, but it won't be enough in terms of their goal scoring that they're going to end up struggling. So for me, I have them sixth, but I could be wrong because, like I said before, Saros was in the Vesna conversation, and if he has another good year, I mean, we've seen goaltenders bring teams to the playoffs before, aka Carey Price. It's possible that it could happen again, but I don't think it will, to be honest.
This team, very, very interesting to look at, honestly. There's just not a lot here that impresses me. A lot of mediocre players. Their defense is pretty solid, in my opinion, but I don't know. They're gonna be a they'll be competitive some nights, and then some nights they'll end up crapping the bed. But this is not the way to go moving forward. This is supposed to be a rebuilding team, and it seems like I was hoping that Trotz was gonna have a fresh perspective, but I guess he just for the moment, not saying long term, but for the moment, seems like he has a old way of thinking about things where he wants to be competitive. He wants, even though the team is filled with a couple of older guys, and he brought in a couple of old guys. He wants to be competitive, and as long as UC Saros is there and Roman Yossi and Philip Forsberg, they're three core pieces. He's gonna try their best. He's gonna try his best to try to put on a competitive team start at the start of the season. So I mean, does it work out? Does it not? We'll see. There's a lot of guys that broke out last year, like Thomas Novak, Luke Evangelista, and Cody Glass. But I mean, is that going to be enough for them to be competitive? I don't think so. Ryan McDonough is not getting any younger. Ryan O'Reilly's not getting any younger. Luke Shan's not getting any younger. I don't know. Honestly, it's just a meh team, in my opinion. Very average team that's going to be carried by their defense. And, Philip Forsberg is going to be given um, all creative work in terms of trying to put the puck in the net because I don't think there's anyone that's as talented as him in terms of scoring. So we'll move on to the next team. We have the St. Louis Blues, a team that was very active in terms of rumors because there was a couple of trades that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, but um, they were more active during the trade deadline where things actually went down and they got rid of guys like Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko. But yeah, in terms of key arrivals, they bring in Kevin Hayes. They help out the Philadelphia Flyers. There was supposed to be this whole blockbuster deal involving Torrey Krug. That didn't end up happening. It was supposed to be like 6 players or like 8 players involved in that trade. That completely fell apart because of Torrey Krug. He rejected that trade. So ultimately, it was a very simple trade just involving Kevin Hayes. They bring back Oscar Sundqvist, and that's pretty much it. In terms of key departures, Tyler Pitlick goes to the Rangers, and Thomas Greiss retires. And, they sign a couple players. Rookies will crack the lineup. Really, the only guy that really screams to me is Joel Hoffer. Yeah, I think he's a very underrated goalie. I think he could back up for the St. Louis Blues. And yeah, maybe Scott Perunovich could make the team, but just looking at their roster, the St. Louis Blues did add guys like Kasperi Kapanen and Jacob Vrana, who really meshed well with the team last year. Two guys that were at the end of their chances. It just wasn't working out for them, and they go to St. Louis and they just start producing, and they really surpassed expectations, and they're back. Looking at their forward group, I think they have a fantastic forward group, very underrated forward group. But what scares me is probably the goaltending in terms of Binnington. I think we reached a point where he's very inconsistent and he's more likely to fight than save the puck. And in terms of defense, a couple guys left. And it's just average in my opinion. Colton Periaco is not by means a top 2 defenseman in my opinion. Nick Leddy, there's only so much he can do. Torrey Krug is not the Torrey Krug from Boston. Justin Falk is very underrated. I'll give him that. And the third pairing is very mediocre. But it's really their offense that is gonna really dictate whether this team could potentially make the playoffs in a wild card spot. I'm not going to say they're going to finish top 3 in the Central. That's not going to happen. But if they want to battle it out for a wild card spot, they're really going to be reliant on their offense.
Yeah, this is a team that really only has one question mark, and that's like you said before. It's a net with Jordan Binnington. You don't know what Binnington you're going to get this year, like you said. If he's able to play like the Binnington that brought St. Louis to a cup and won them a cup, you're in for a good season. If it's going to be the Binnington of last year, it's going to be a rough year. I like their forward group. I really like their top line. Kyrou, Thomas, Bushnevich is fantastic. It kind of drops off after that. Kasperi Kapanen didn't work in Pittsburgh, didn't work in Toronto. Is he going to get an opportunity in St. Louis where it's going to work? I'm not sure. He's a speedy player. I'm not sure he's a top 6 player in the NHL.
Well, it did work, but can it work consistently? That's the question
Yeah,
mark.
that's the question mark, right? And then obviously, Jacob Vrana, again, kind of the same situation. It worked in St. Louis. Can it work consistently? Kevin Hayes, I mean, look, he's still a good player, Kevin Hayes. I don't think he's going to be a bad player for them at all. I think having him as your third line center, potentially even playing on the wing on your second line might be an option for them. Their forward core is good, right? It's not a bad forward core by any means. Their defense, I think, is a little bit older than people would like. Nick Leddy at a point in his career where, he's still not the oldest defenseman, but he's also not young either. Colton Parayko's kind of dropped off over the last couple of years, like you mentioned. I don't think he's a top 2 defenseman, but considering the fact that who he has on his team, I think he's probably the best defenseman on their team, which says a lot. Torrey Krug, I mean, look, he's kind of dropped off a little bit. We all know that, St. Louis tried to trade him. How is he going to be this year? And Justin Falk, I mean, look, good power play guy. I think he's going to play a solid game for them. But for me, it really comes down to, is this team going to be consistent enough all season? Because we've seen the lack of consistency with St. Louis for so many years over the last couple of seasons. And I think for this team can they find some consistency in their game? And if they can, they might be one of the better teams in this division. If they can't, they're going to kind of be in the same position they were last year, Only this time, I think they're probably a little bit of a better team. Like you said before, I'm a big fan of Joel Hofer as their backup. Watched him a little bit in the AHL. Can tell you that he's a fantastic AHL goaltender who really played really well. I think he can transition over to the NHL and be dominant for them. But I'm not sure that he's their answer right now. He might be in the future. I'm just not sure that he's able to play a full season if Binnington were to go down. But we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think for St. Louis, it's going to be fourth. And that's why the team that we're going to be covering next is the team that I have third place. And I'm going to give you um, a in-depth analysis as to why I believe the Winnipeg Jets are going to be third and why a lot of people are sleeping
Uh,
on the Winnipeg Jets to
yeah,
finish third.
I mean, the one thing I would like to add before we move on to the next team, I do believe that St. Louis has better center depth than the Minnesota Wild. I'll give them that. I'll give them that in terms of the top three teams that could potentially finish in the Central Division or expected to finish in the top three in the Central Division. They do have better center depth than Minnesota. But that's all I wanted to say in terms of
Yeah,
that.
but
Moving on to the next team, the Winnipeg Jets. So this is going to be a very interesting one. So the Winnipeg Jets. Honestly, I think they got a fantastic haul for Pierre-Luc Dubois. You guys could check out our trade video or trade breakdown video on that. Gabriel Velarde, very underrated player that finally found his groove at LA last year, and I think he will continue to do so. And there was a logjam in terms of forwards there, so he was always finding himself on the third line most of the time. So I think he's expected to break out. You have Alex Afalo, very underrated player, one of the best third line players you could possibly have on an NHL roster. I think he's fantastic. You have a healthy Cole Perfetti. Finally, he was out for basically the whole season last year. You have Rasmus Kupari, that's part of the LA trade that comes to Winnipeg. Every single player they got in that trade is gonna be on the starting roster come October. So, in my opinion, Winnipeg really got a haul in that Dubois trade, and you have Morgan Barron, who's really finding his groove as well. I think he's had a pretty good camp and development as well. The Mestikov, he was a fantastic ad. Nino Niederreiter as well. I would say the weakest guy on this team is Mason Alperton, but everyone else is fantastic. Even their captain Adam Lowry, amazing two-way shutdown centerman, very underrated as well. So I mean, in terms of Winnipeg, it's gonna be very exciting. People thought they were dead, but guess what? I think they're slowly gonna come back. And in terms of their defense, pretty much the same thing like it was the last 2 years. Morrissey's going to be their top guy. He had a great season last year. Pretty sure it was a breakout season for him in terms of points, career year. Dylan DeMello, Brendan Dillon, Neil Pionk. Neil Pionk's gonna have to step up, in my opinion, and bounce back. You have Nate Schmidt, Dylan Sandberg. So there's those guys, the usual suspects. And in terms of goaltending, Connor Hellebuck and Laurent Brossois, who really improved compared to when he was with Winnipeg the first time. He just won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. He's developed into a fantastic backup goalie where he's even been able to play as a starter in some cases. So their goaltending duo is back to what it was like a couple of years ago. Their forwards are great. Sure, they don't have the best defensive core that they've had compared to the past when they had guys like Dustin Bufflin there and that old core. But I do believe that their offense has been reshaped and for the better, and they got a lot of pieces to fill in holes. That they had last year, and that's all thanks to Pierre-Luc Dubois wanting out of Winnipeg. So I do believe that this team will give Minnesota a run for its money, but again, it all comes down to the chemistry. There's a lot of new guys on this roster. There's three key guys. Can they develop the chemistry that's necessary to get the other guys kicking? And can the other guys do the same thing for these new guys that are entering the Winnipeg Jets for their first season? And the defense, will it be solid enough moving forward to help out a guy like Connor Hellebuck to, not have to rely on him too much because, he's expressed that he wants to be on a contending team. He wants to move forward. There's a lot of, things about his displeasure at Winnipeg that needs to change. And this is going to be a make it or break it season for them.
look, There's a lot of factors that go into the Winnipeg Jets and their offseason. The first thing I want to say is um, it's a very important that they have a good season this year. And the reason for that is because of two main guys that are on this team, Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, and their contract negotiations. Obviously, Hellebuck has stated multiple times that he probably doesn't want to play in Canada. So you're probably getting Hellebuck on his final season this year. And what's interesting for Connor Hellebuck is he's going to want to prove everybody wrong because he either gets traded or he ends up walking in free agency and he ends up signing with a different team or he ends up staying in Winnipeg. But ultimately, he's going to want a lot to prove. And so is Mark Scheifele. And so I think for the Jets, there's that factor that comes into it where they've got two guys that are maybe not in on the verge of resigning, but have things to prove. Then you bring in Gabe Velarde, Alex Iafallo, and Rasmus Kupari, who are guys that you acquired in the PLD trade. And if we all know anything about Pierre-Luc Dubois, he didn't want to be in Winnipeg, right? And then you have Blake Wheeler, where there was a lot of rumors about how he was toxic and how he wasn't a good captain, and there was a lot of drift in the locker room. What one thing the Winnipeg Jets have done this offseason is they've essentially removed the toxic players out of the locker room and tried to make it a more inclusive locker room. And I think that that ultimately is going to play a factor in their uh, season this year because of the fact that they've gotten rid of two guys that were causing problems in the locker room. Now, the other thing that I really like is that they added Adam Lowry as the captain, which I think is very good. I think he's been there for a long time. He's been there his whole career, and I think he's a good leader for them. That's going to help them out. But not only that, I know that they haven't really done much apart from the PLD trade that they did. They didn't really do anything else.
Well, I mean, they
But
reshaped their whole
yeah,
forward core. I mean, you didn't
no,
really
I
have to
know.
do
I'm saying
much.
yeah, but technically, I'm saying that one move pretty much did it all. But besides that, they didn't really do anything, at least on the defensive side of the game, apart from bringing back Laurent Brossoit. But Josh Morrissey had a really good year last year. Neil Pionk, the expectation is he'll bounce back. I think there's a few guys that we're not even talking about that could potentially crack the roster. One of them being Brad Lambert, who, if everyone knows, everyone knows how high people are on him. I think the expectation is he cracks the roster. There's also Chaz Lucius and Colby Barlow, who are two guys that have been drafted in the previous years. Barlow last year. Who I think could be a really interesting player that could join them in training camp, out of training camp. And then obviously, just on the defensive side of things, is Vili Hanola finally going to get a permanent spot? We'll have to wait and see. So the Jets have some good talent. They have some really good players. And I think ultimately they're just in a better position than Minnesota is. And for that reason, and the fact that I think Connor Hellebuck's one of the best goalies in the league, I think the Jets are finally going to have a better year this year. I think they're going to finish third in the division. It's going to be a fun year for Jets fans. It's going to be a fun year for the Jets in general. And who knows, if they have a really good year and they go on a deep playoff run, they might be able to convince Scheifele and Hellebuck to stay. We'll have to wait and see. But look, they're a good team. And if Nikolai Ehlers can stay healthy and if Kyle Connor could score 40 goals again this year, I think this is a team that can easily be third in the division and potentially go as far as they can in the playoffs.
And don't forget, Kyle Connor, one of the best
Goal
snipers in
scorer.
the league,
Yeah.
elite, in my opinion, not spoken enough, and deserves a lot more credit. Nino Niederreiter, one of the best secondary scoring wingers in the league, does not get enough recognition.
Yeah.
Nikolai Ehlers, same thing. They have a lot of great winger depth, and it so happens to be they're all underrated. I look at every single guy here. No one's overrated, in my opinion. Everyone is underrated. All these guys could do damage. The only thing here that would kind of scare me is Cole Perfetti in terms of being second line center. I don't know if he's completely ready because he did miss a lot of time during his first season. I think he needs some conditioning. So maybe putting on the third line would be better and having Adam Lowry playing the second line just until he gets into the groove of things. And Nemestikov playing fourth line. Come on, man. He was playing great in the top nine. Put him where he belongs. Mason Appleton, get your butt on the fourth line. You're not a third liner. You're a fourth liner, in my opinion. You've came and gone many times with the Winnipeg Jets. You belong in the fourth line, unless Nemestikov craps the bed. But that's the only changes I would make. Defense is fine, but this is a team that's expecting to bounce back big time, and I think they'll give Minnesota a run for their money. But as of right now, there's a lot yet to be desired for Winnipeg, so I'll have Minnesota with the edge, but I do believe Winnipeg will give them a run for their money. But guys, we just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you like this breakdown. I know we've covered the Atlantic and the Metropolitan, now the Central, and we've done videos that are over an hour, but please take the time. We worked really hard on these videos. We did a really big in-depth analysis. So, find your team that we speak about, click on them, and if you agree with our thoughts, make sure to comment in the comment section below. If you disagree with our thoughts, make sure to comment in the comment section below. But and don't forget to subscribe to our channel as well. We'll talk to you guys very soon. We have one more video to cover in terms of the series, which is going to be the Pacific Division, which is going to be very exciting and very tight in terms of the race of who's going to finish first in that division. But guys, thank you so much, guys, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns Podcast.